The room went silent. I stood in the center of my own living room, the copper taste of blood filling my mouth. My wife, Elena, stood by the fireplace, her arms crossed, looking at me not with concern, but with a chilling, clinical disgust. Beside her stood Marcus, her business partner, and the man who had just slammed his fist into my jaw. He was adjusting his cufflinks, looking down at me as if I were a stain on an expensive rug. "Sign the papers, Arthur," Elena said, her voice like shards of ice. "You were always a placeholder, a quiet, boring little man I used to bridge the gap until someone like Marcus came along. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I didn't say a word. I just wiped the blood from my lip and looked at the divorce settlement on the coffee table. It wasn't just a divorce, it was a total surrender. It demanded I waive my rights to the house, my savings, and the proprietary software I had spent 5 years developing in my home office. They thought I was a nobody, a humble IT consultant who spent too much time in the basement. They saw my silence as weakness. They saw my lack of ambition as a lack of intelligence. Marcus stepped forward, his shadow looming over me. He was the CEO of a mid-sized tech firm, a man who believed money could buy silence and muscles could enforce it. "You heard her, kid. You're outclassed. I've already moved my things into the master bedroom. If you don't sign, I'll have my security team toss you onto the sidewalk, and believe me, the police won't help a domestic abuser like you." He gestured to his own face, where a faint red mark showed where I had tried to defend myself. He was going to frame me. He was going to take my home, my wife, and my life's work, and he was going to use the law to do it. I looked up at the corner of the room. A small black dome was tucked into the crown molding. It was one of 12 I had installed when we moved in. Elena had always complained they were an eyesore, so I told her I'd deactivated them months ago to save on the server costs. "Is that your final answer?" I asked, my voice steady despite the throbbing in my head. "It's the only answer," Marcus sneered, picking up the pen and tossing it at my feet. I didn't pick up the pen. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small encrypted flash drive. "Then I guess we should see what the house thinks about that," I whispered. Marcus laughed, a deep mocking sound, but Elena's expression shifted. She knew I never did anything without a reason. I turned toward my laptop, and the first click of the mouse changed everything. To understand how I got here, you have to understand the last 3 years. I was the lucky husband. That's what Elena's friends called me at the high society galas I was forced to attend. I was the quiet guy in the corner wearing a suit that didn't quite fit right, while Elena sparkled in the center of the room. "He's in tech," she would say with a dismissive wave of her hand whenever someone asked what I did. "He fixes computers, the boring stuff that keeps the lights on." She treated me like a piece of furniture, functional but easily replaced. I handled the bills, the taxes, the home maintenance, and the security. I stayed in my basement office coding and building the architecture for what would become a multi-million-dollar data encryption firm. I didn't care about the spotlight. I cared about the foundation. But while I was building our future, Elena was building a way out. It started with late-night board meetings and weekend retreats. Then came the expensive gifts she didn't buy with our joint account. I wasn't blind. I was just meticulous. I didn't confront her with whispers or accusations. I waited. 6 months ago, I noticed Marcus's car in our driveway on my way back from a grocery run. I didn't go inside. I went to the local library, opened my laptop, and accessed the hidden partition of our home server. I watched them on my screen, my wife and her lover, laughing about how pathetic and clueless I was. "He's a mouse," Marcus had said on the recording, pouring a glass of my vintage scotch. "Mice don't fight back. They just hide in the walls." I realized then that my marriage was a lie, but my house was a fortress. I spent the next several months documenting everything. Every time Marcus stayed over, every time they discussed revising the deed to the house, every time they plotted to frame me for financial mismanagement of Elena's personal trust. They thought I was a simple IT guy. They forgot that in the modern world, the person who controls the data controls the truth. Back in the present, Marcus's laughter died down as he saw the progress bar on my laptop screen. He walked over, intending to slam the lid shut, but I moved with a speed that surprised him. I stepped back, holding the laptop out of reach. "You think a few videos of us kissing are going to hold up in court?" Elena spat. "Adultery isn't a crime here, Arthur, but the assault Marcus is about to report certainly is." "It's not just the kissing, Elena," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "It's the audio from last night, the part where Marcus explains how he's been embezzling from his own shareholders to pay for your offshore accounts." The color drained from Marcus's face. For a second, the alpha male bravado flickered. He lunged for the laptop, but I was already behind the kitchen island. I wasn't a fighter, but I knew my own house like the back of my hand. I knew exactly where the floor creaked and where the shadows were deepest. "You're bluffing," Marcus hissed. "You don't have access to my company files." "I don't need your files," I replied calmly. "I just needed your phone. Remember 3 weeks ago when you asked me to fix your Wi-Fi connection because it was lagging? I didn't just fix it, I cloned your device. Every email, every hidden ledger, every encrypted message you sent to your CFO about the Project X write-offs, it's all on my server." Elena looked at Marcus, her eyes wide with a sudden sharp fear. "Marcus, what is he talking about?" "He's lying," Marcus shouted, though his sweating forehead told a different story. "He's a basement-dwelling loser. He couldn't hack a toaster." "I didn't have to hack anything," I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "I built the encryption protocol your company uses. I sold it to your firm through a shell corporation 3 years ago. I'm not just the guy who fixes your Wi-Fi, Marcus. I'm your landlord, digitally speaking." This was the trigger. I had been playing the role of the submissive husband for years, letting them believe I was a doormat, but now the cornered mouse had turned into a predator. The betrayal ran deeper than just an affair. Elena had been funneling money from our joint savings into Marcus's failing company, thinking she was investing in their new life together. She didn't realize Marcus was using her as a human shield. If the company went down, the paper trail led straight to her, not him. "You stole from us, Elena," I said softly. "You took the money my father left me for the business and gave it to a man who's been using you as a legal fall girl." "That's a lie!" she screamed, lunging for the divorce papers. "I own this house. The deed is in my name." "Check the filing from yesterday," I said. "There was a clause in the original purchase agreement, a clause about undisclosed third-party liens. Since you used stolen funds to pay off the mortgage, the title insurance company flagged it. As of 9 a.m. this morning, the house is in probate." Suddenly, the front door chimes rang. It wasn't a guest. It was a rhythmic, heavy pounding. "That will be the police," I said, looking at the clock. "But they aren't here for me." The heavy oak doors of our home were pushed open, and 2 officers stepped into the foyer. Marcus immediately shifted gears. He slumped against the wall, holding his jaw, putting on a performance that would have won an Oscar. "Thank God you're here," Marcus groaned. "This man, he went crazy. He attacked me and my fiancé. He's been stalking us in our own home." Elena joined in, her face twisting into a mask of fake tears. "He's dangerous, officer. He has hidden cameras everywhere. He's obsessed. Please, get him out of here before he hurts someone else." The lead officer, a veteran with a tired face named Sergeant Miller, looked at me. I stood there, calm, my hands visible, the laptop still open on the counter. I didn't look like a man who had just committed an assault. I looked like a man who was waiting for a movie to start. "Sir, step away from the computer," Miller ordered. "Of course, Sergeant," I said, "but before you take me into custody, you might want to look at the living room TV. I've mirrored my screen to the 85-inch display." With a flick of my wrist, the massive television on the wall roared to life. It wasn't a movie. It was a high-definition, multi-angle view of the living room from 10 minutes ago. The room went silent again as the video played. There was Marcus, standing over me. There was the sound of the punch, loud and wet and unprovoked. There was Elena's voice, clear as a bell. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Sign the papers." The footage didn't stop there.
It cut to a recording from the previous night in the bedroom. Marcus and Elena were sitting on the bed, counting stacks of cash. Once the loser signs the house over, we'll report the theft of the company funds and blame it on his IP address. By the time the auditors find the truth, we'll be in the Caymans. Elena's face on the screen laughed. He's too stupid to even notice the money is gone. He thinks I'm at yoga. In the real living room, Elena let out a strangled gasp. Marcus took a step towards the TV, but Sergeant Miller put a hand on his holster. "Stay right there, Mr. Starling," Miller said, his voice dropping into a dangerous growl. "That's a deep fake," Marcus yelled, his voice cracking. "He's an IT guy. He fabricated the whole thing." "I didn't have to hack anything," I said, clicking a final button. "The original, unedited raw files were uploaded to a secure police server 5 minutes ago, along with your tax returns."
For the first time in our marriage, Elena looked at me with something other than contempt. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated terror. She realized she didn't know the man she had been living with for 5 years. She had married a nobody, but that nobody had built a digital cage around her without her ever feeling the bars. Sergeant Miller looked at his partner. "Handcuff him, and her." "Wait," Elena cried. "I'm a victim. He tricked me. Arthur, tell them." I didn't say a word. I simply reached into the kitchen drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. I handed it to the sergeant. "What's this?" Miller asked. "The original deed to the house, the prenuptial agreement, and a full forensic audit of the joint accounts," I said. "You'll find a hidden clause on page 12 of the prenup. It states that in the event of documented infidelity or criminal conspiracy against the spouse, all marital assets, including the proprietary software and the estate, revert solely to me. It's signed, notarized, and was filed with my lawyer 3 years ago." Marcus was being pushed against the wall, his hands being pulled behind his back. "You think you're smart, don't you? You think this is over? I have lawyers who will eat you alive." "Actually, Marcus," I said, walking over to him until we were inches apart, "your lawyers are currently being served with subpoenas. You see, the firm you work for, the one you think you run, I'm the majority shareholder. I've been buying up your debt through a holding company for 18 months. As of this morning, you're my boss, and you're fired." The bravado finally broke. Marcus's knees buckled. He wasn't the powerful CEO anymore. He was just a man in an expensive suit being dragged out of a house he didn't own. Elena was sobbing now, the Ice Queen facade completely shattered. "Arthur, please, we can talk about this. I was confused. He manipulated me." "The cameras heard everything, Elena," I said quietly. "They don't lie. They just record." As the police led them out, the house became unnervingly quiet. I sat down at the kitchen island and finally felt the pain in my jaw. It was worth it. I looked at my laptop. A new email had just arrived from my lead attorney. The subject line read, "The Inheritance Papers." My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just about the house. There was a second secret I hadn't even told Elena. The email from my lawyer, Mr. Henderson, contained a scanned document that I had kept locked in a hidden safe in the basement for years. It was my father's true last will and testament. The world knew my father as a simple clockmaker who died with nothing but a small shop and a mountain of debt. That was the story I let Elena believe. I let her think I came from trash. It made it easier to see her true colors. But the reality was different. My father was the lead architect for the security systems used by the Federal Reserve. The clockmaker shop was a front for a patent holding company that owned the rights to half the encryption protocols used in modern banking. When he died, he left everything to me, but with one condition. "Arthur, do not claim your throne until you find a partner who loves the man, not the crown. If you find yourself surrounded by wolves, use the crown to cage them." I had been living a double life. To the world, I was a struggling IT consultant. In reality, I was the sole heir to the Sterling Vance estate. I opened the attachment. It was a confirmation from the bank. The transfer of the secret shares in Marcus's company was complete. I didn't just own his debt, I owned his legacy. Every building his company operated out of, every patent they claimed, it was all mine now. But as I scrolled down, I saw something that made my blood run cold.
There was a second name on one of the old bank ledgers from my father's clock shop, a name I recognized, a name that shouldn't have been there. Marcus's father. They hadn't just met by chance. This wasn't just a random affair. Marcus had been hunting me. He knew who I was all along. He had used Elena to get close to the clueless heir to the Sterling Vance fortune. He didn't want my wife. He wanted the keys to my father's vault. I looked at the security footage again, rewinding to a moment I had missed. While Marcus was hitting me, he had reached for my neck. He wasn't trying to choke me. He was looking for the safe key I always wore on a chain. He hadn't found it because I had moved it. But then I heard a sound from the basement, a heavy metallic thud. The house was supposed to be empty, but the silent alarm on my phone was screaming, "Basement safe tampered with."
I didn't call the police back. Not yet. I knew the basement better than anyone. I grabbed a heavy flashlight and moved silently down the stairs. The basement was a labyrinth of servers and old machinery. In the far corner, behind a false wall of shelving, sat the safe. It was a massive, vintage iron box that required both a physical key and a biometric scan. I rounded the corner and saw a figure hunched over the safe. It wasn't Marcus. He was in a patrol car. It was the quiet assistant from Marcus's office, a man named Leo, who I had always thought was harmless. He had a specialized thermal drill in his hand. "You're late, Arthur," Leo said without looking back. He turned around, and in his other hand was a suppressed pistol. Marcus was the distraction. He's the loud, arrogant idiot we use to keep people looking the wrong way. But I'm the one who actually does the work. "Who are you working for?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Marcus's father is dead." "His father is very much alive, Arthur. He just changed his name," Leo sneered. "He's been waiting 30 years to get back what your father stole from him. Those encryption codes, they were a joint venture. Your father took the credit, and mine took the fall." Leo was Marcus's brother. The lowly assistant was the mastermind. The affair with Elena was just a way to keep me distracted while they mapped out the house's security. "You won't get into that safe," I said. "It's rigged to incinerate the contents if the biometric scan fails 3 times. "That's why I'm not going to fail," Leo said, gesturing for me to come closer. "You're going to open it for me, and then you're going to have a tragic accident in this basement, a gas leak perhaps. The grieving widow, who will get out on bail, will inherit what's left, and she'll sign it over to us." They had planned for everything. They had a countermove for my countermove. Or so they thought. "You think I'm the only one who records things, Leo?" I asked, a small smile playing on my lips. "I don't care about your cameras," Leo said, leveling the gun at my chest. "Open the safe, now." I stepped forward and placed my hand on the scanner, but I didn't use my thumb. I used my pinky finger, the emergency silent alarm trigger. The safe didn't click open. Instead, every light in the basement turned a deep, pulsing red. A high-frequency hum began to vibrate through the floorboards, a sound so piercing that Leo dropped his drill, clutching his ears in agony. "What did you do?" he screamed over the noise. "I activated the hostile takeover protocol," I shouted back. Suddenly, the shelving unit behind Leo swung forward, pinned him against the safe. This wasn't a normal house. It was a masterpiece of defensive engineering. I had spent years turning this basement into a trap for exactly this moment. By the time the secondary police unit arrived, called automatically by the silent alarm, Leo was trapped, his weapon kicked far out of reach. Fast forward 48 hours. The scene shifted from the basement to the Mahogany Row boardroom of Sterling Vance's primary competitor. I sat at the head of the table, my jaw still bruised, wearing a bespoke suit that finally fit perfectly. Across from me sat Marcus's father, the man who had been pulling the strings from the shadows. He looked old, defeated, and gray. Beside him were the lawyers who had tried to destroy me.
On the large projector screen, I played the CCTV footage from the basement. It wasn't just video, it was a confession. Leo had talked quite a bit before the police arrived, thinking he had the upper hand. He laid out the entire conspiracy, the embezzlement, the fraud, the attempted murder. "Your sons are in custody," I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. "Your assets are frozen, and the Project X files you thought you stole, they're dummy files. Every bit of data you took from my server for the last year was laced with a tracking virus. It's currently dismantling your entire offshore network." The old man stared at me. You're just like your father, a ghost in the machine." "No," I said, leaning forward. "My father was a builder. I'm the one who settles the debts."
Just as I prepared to sign the final documents to dissolve their company, my lawyer, Mr. Henderson, stepped into the room. He looked pale, holding a small, old phone recording device. "Arthur," he whispered, "there's one more thing. We found a secondary vault in the clock shop. There was a letter, and this." He pressed play on the old device. A voice filled the room, a voice I hadn't heard in years, my father's. "Arthur, if you're hearing this, it means you've won. But there is a truth you need to know about Marcus's family. They didn't steal from me. I didn't steal from them. We were partners until the very end." The room went silent. I looked at the old man across the table. He was trembling. The recording continued. "The theft was a lie we both created to protect the technology from the government. We staged a fallout. I took the patents, he took the debt to keep the trail cold. He wasn't your enemy, Arthur. He was my best friend. If his sons have turned against you, it's because they didn't know the truth. They thought they were seeking justice for a lie." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The revenge I had worked so hard for, the villains I had dismantled, were the children of the man who had helped my father build everything. Marcus and Elena hadn't been acting out of simple greed. They were acting out of a 30-year-old misunderstanding, fueled by the silence of two fathers who kept too many secrets. I looked at Marcus's father. You knew? You knew this whole time?" The old man shook his head. "I didn't know my sons were coming for you, Arthur. I told them to stay away. I told them the debt was settled, but they grew up bitter. They saw you living in that house, and they saw me living in shadows. They thought they were taking back what was ours." The cliffhanger was no longer about a trap, it was about a choice. I had the power to destroy them completely, or I had the power to fix a 30-year-old mistake. The boardroom was tense. My lawyers were nudging me to sign the papers that would send Marcus and Leo to prison for 20 years and bankrupt their father. The evidence was ironclad. The karma was complete. But I looked at the old man, and I saw my own father's face in his weary eyes. "I'm dropping the attempted murder charges against Leo," I said. The room gasped. My lawyers started to protest, but I held up a hand. "On one condition," I looked at the old man. "They plead guilty to the financial fraud. They serve 3 years of community service in restitution, and they work for me, under my supervision. They have talent, but they have no direction. I'm going to teach them the business their father and mine actually built." As for Elena, there was no mercy for her. She wasn't part of the legacy. She was just a woman who chose greed over loyalty. I allowed the fraud charges against her to proceed. She lost the house, the cars, and her reputation. The last I heard, she was working as a junior clerk in a law firm, ironically filing the kind of papers she once tried to use to destroy me. I walked out of the boardroom and back to my boring house. I didn't change the locks. I didn't need to. The house was no longer a fortress or a trap. It was just a home. I sat in my basement looking at the empty safe. The true treasure wasn't the gold or the patents. It was the realization that power isn't about how much you can take, it's about how much you can choose not to take. I picked up a photo of my father. I had stayed humble, I had stayed quiet, and in the end, the truth had done all the heavy lifting for me.
As I closed my laptop one last time, I thought about the words my father always told me, words that Marcus, Elena, and the rest of the world had forgotten. Never underestimate the quiet man. He isn't silent because he has nothing to say. He's silent because he's already 3 steps ahead of you. Karma does not forget. It simply waits for the right time to play the footage.